product security, that term has been around for quite a while. And a lot of people say, well, this is my product, and it could be a software only product. For those of us that are working with products that have a hardware component to it, it could be IoT, it could be OT, operational technology. It could be considered what that is called cyber physical systems. What's different and what we're doing for this definition, for this center of excellence, is talking about those type of products where it has more than a software component to it. So we are working with embedded software and embedded systems. We are using the terms firmware, and we are working with a lot of products that have safety implications. For example, medical devices, or in my world, industrial control systems, the systems that run the electricity and the water utilities. Those safety components are very important. And so these, let's just say, more tangible, even your phone being a actual product, that has a lot of concerns when we're looking at developing products, and we'll talk about that today. And that's why this product center of excellence are for those people that are beyond from just the software, because we have a lot of dependencies on other items. We have dependencies on chips and drivers and other components that are beyond our capability. And even you might say, even chip manufacturers themselves, they are in that world of product security because there's something physical and tangible in addition to, the bits and bytes.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that introduction, Cassie. So before we go into the details of the panel itself, how about we do a quick poll, Jeremy, so that we know who's in attendance, who is focusing on product security, who's interested in learning about product security and things like that. So if you can take a quick minute and please answer this question. So, Jeremy, how are we doing on the poll?
I'm seeing some good responses. Let's keep the train moving.
All right. So, are we at a point where we have enough that you can share the results of the poll?
Yeah. Let me give people just another little minute. I'm still seeing the numbers go up. All right. Final call. Okay. Thanks, everybody. All right. Can everybody see that on screen?
Yeah. So what do we have? We have primarily focused on application security, 30%, product security combination, about 20%, involved in both AppSec, 40%, right? Exploring 5%, other. So we have about 60% who are actively involved in product security with hardware and software in it, and 30% in security, application security. I'm sure there is some crossover in terms of the discussions that we have on best practices across these two, right? So, all right. So let's get started with the second question here. This question is for Deepak and Jagadish, if you can answer this question too, and then Cassie later on. So how do you think of your organization when you set it up like a product security organization? So what are the factors that you look at, and what you have found works and what doesn't work?
Yeah, great question, Raj. So as we are really setting up the organization, as Casey said, and then kind of walked us through about broader product security umbrella, it's evident that it's about the full architecture. It's about the managing the full life cycle from the requirement to the disposal. So structuring the organization, which relates not only with the business objective, but how really the business is structured is the key, because it kind of at times varies depending on the size of the organization, etc. However, how I kind of look at it is there is definitely a centralized model where you are centralizing and consolidating the policies and the governance, etc. But then there's a matrix piece to it where you really embed the cybersecurity into the products and the R&D. That's what I had more success with, because then we are more closer to the architecture, to the embedment into understanding the different mechanics and the pathways involved into the product side of the fence. So the key benefits, I would say, as part of the matrix culture, which I've led, developed, as well as implemented throughout my career, is not only it enables the product aligned decision making, but it really helped enrich and enhance the collaboration, better threat modeling on an ongoing basis, which is absolutely the key, and then also really help us be more close towards some of the very key stakeholders, such as DevOps and the regulatory affairs and the others. I'll let Jagdish add his take into this as well.
I think Deepak, you summarized it very well. So essentially, what I've seen is when we start the product security, it's always good to have the centralized way of doing it because you are building some processes, the technology and everything for entire organization, right? So you start with a centralized piece, you understand the requirements of all the entire business and start building the foundation, just like how we build the house, right? So we build everything, the foundation for the entire house. So we start building that. And one of the key aspect is the cyber champions, right? So that's a we consider them as the satellite team or extension of product security always because that's the only way we can reach to every product teams, right? So that's a very important. While we are centralizing the actual team, we need to start building that ecosystem that becomes a matrix organization. And as we grow, as based on the culture of the security culture of the company or the organization, we can evolve over a period of time. But at least to begin with, we need to have the centralized product security team. And also, it is important where the reporting chain goes up to, right? So, is it directly connected with the business? For instance, directly to the CTO or the chief engineer or somebody, right? Because if it goes under the IT, that is where whole what do you call? You may not completely achieve the objectives sometimes. The product security should always be highlighted. It should not be buried under the hierarchy, right? Because you are directly connected with the business and you are delivering the business values. And to show that business value, you need to have the what do you call seat on the table, right? If not, you will be the meal. So that's how I would put it across. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that perspective. Cassie, what's your take on this?
So very similar to what Jagadish mentioned, we're Schneider Electric. We've got over 14,000 people in our R&D organization, about 4,000 developers, and we have a centralized and a matrix model. So centralized is governance, risk, and compliance, the policies. Also, we have our own global security lab that does pen testing. We do some external pen testing too, but a majority of it is done by our own team that's Crest accredited. And so in regards to policy vulnerability management, we have a centralized vulnerability management, our own corporate cert, and then we have vulnerability handlers throughout, in addition to what Jagadish mentioned, those champions. We call them cybersecurity advisors. So those cybersecurity advisors are responsible for the processes and making sure that the teams understand the tools and technologies and their security reviews. And so our community calls where we have product security and cybersecurity, because it's a blend in today's world, right? Especially if some of our products are cloud products. We have nearly almost, I think, 500 people on those community calls once a month now. And so it's a very large community. Not 100% of those people are full-time dedicated to product security or cybersecurity, but I would say about 80 to 90% are.
All right, thank you. I have seen these different structures from my conversations with other teams that some of them have IT reporting up to IT and some reporting to product security. I think each has its own benefits and disadvantages has articulated here. So in terms of the design itself, right, moving on to the next question. So what are the what are the critical risk decisions that you make when it comes to software, hardware, and firmware, right? Because each one of them come with their own complexities. Cassie, if you can please answer this first.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the description, we have a lot of us who create these products have a component or interoperability. So what that means to us is when you're putting together, let's say, even a product that has maybe 10 chips in it or something of that, you have to make sure they all work together. And then you have to consider if they're working in some kind of physical environment. There's the safety aspect. So not only are we looking at requirements from, I need to get all this to work together. So you have hardware and firmware engineers, and they're testing and evaluating chips and making sure they work. But then also, are they interoperable to other parts of the system? There are very custom protocols. Schneider Electric has protocols that we've open sourced called Modbus that's in industrial control systems. So all of this concept when you're working on products is very important. So cybersecurity is not really a bolt-on in our world because most of these products you have to think about safety first. And so to actually move forward in cybersecurity, leveraging that safety mindset was very easy. And in fact, the first secure development lifecycle was off the standard from ISA IEC 62443-4-1, and it is the only secure development lifecycle that you can certify to. And so a lot of us in the product security community, whether you're doing medical devices or like OT devices like us, we take that very seriously and from a maturity level, which is, I think, why you see a lot of product security offices be very mature. So our firmware engineers, our hardware engineers, and our software engineers are trained on cybersecurity and the overall product lifecycle that Deepak was mentioning earlier, because as you're going through and doing updates, which let me mention just shortly that most products that have a physical component to them, they're not updated every day or every week like in a cloud environment. It's generally could be biannual, only twice a year, maybe once a year, because that testing cycle, that a regression cycle and interoperability testing can take 3 months to make sure that all the safety is kept in mind.
Yeah, and also in your case, you need to get the buy-in from the customers, really, right? I mean, like they have to be, in many cases, they are the ones who have to do these updates. And in some cases, they don't even have daily access to those products
That's
because it
right.
might be deployed somewhere deep in the field where maybe somebody goes once a month, who knows, once
Or once a year, just to
once
make
a year,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's very common.
So how do you handle those complexities,
And
customer interactions? How do you set up your organizations
yeah.
that handles that?
Yeah, so our teams have interoperability, special testing, cybersecurity. Doing even penetration testing means you have to ship physical products somewhere, and that takes time to do. So there are, I think you would just normally see it in your app cycle. There's additional teams and labs that we have to verify through. And then when it comes to working with customers, interoperability like Schneider Electric products working in the same environment as Honeywell or Siemens or other, same things with hospitals, you're working with multiple vendors or in situations. So customers have labs and or you could do even just system testing. Like we've got areas where customer acceptance testing, because you can't just easily move a huge electrical, you see those green boxes on the side of a building, you're just not shipping them around. Customers come in and physically test and they bring in products. And how do they work with their, for example, firewalls and other environments and other physical devices. So it's very complex, these system environments for customers. And so understanding the requirements, but being adaptable for those, it takes a lot of time. So some of these projects take 3 to 5 years to deploy.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Jagadish?
Yeah. So the risk, the complexity start even before the product development starts, right? So it starts way beyond, because most of us most of the companies don't do all the product from the scratch. So we start sourcing a lot of things from various vendors, right? So it all starts from the how do we agree with our customer, the suppliers, right? So what are all the security clauses we add into those suppliers? Because like Cassie said, these are going to be in the field for a long time. And you need to make sure that your supply chain is also staying so long to make sure that you are servicing those aspects, right? So these are all not security, but this is business security, not the technical security, right? So the risk assessment starts way beyond the actual product development phase. It starts with the vendor, and then we get into the actual secure by design principle, right? So because we can't replace these products just like with a new version, we need to make sure that we are using the component which can give us longer reliability or security for a longer duration, right? So that's stats, and most of these products are custom made, like you said, right? So there are specific use cases, and some products may be used in the different use cases. We need to understand these use cases while building the security, right? So these are all some of the interesting and challenging aspect of product security, but ultimately the monitoring becomes even further, right? So you are monitoring this product for almost 20 years, 30 years. The airlines operate for 30 years, trains operate for at least 30 years, 50 years, right? So you are monitoring, and you are building something. You are building a product which is going to stay in the field for at least decades, right? So you need to think through that and build your design and develop the solution. So the risk assessment is complex, and it starts before your product development.
Right. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is just because of the complexity of the deployments that you have, the factors that go into deciding the risk of a particular application running on a particular device might be different based on where they are deployed as well. There might be a train that was released maybe 30 years ago, which is still in service. Maybe there's a train that was deployed just last year, which is running a totally different set of software, different set of hardwares, encryption and things like that, right? And but the one that's been in operation for 30 years might be the one that is bringing in bulk of the revenue for your customer.
Yeah.
That might be the most important for them, right? So the risk calculus becomes very different for you, not only you, but for your customer also.
Right.
So what does that mean in terms of your security practices? So every product that goes out has to meet the highest quality. You can't really, that's one. And how do you deal with the legacy that's software that's been out in the field for like what, 20, 30 years now?
Yeah, like the legacy, dealing with the legacy is the difficult choice, right? So because some of the product born even before I was born, right? So
Correct.
so we can't really make it, but we see how we can bring in some mitigation controls on top of it, right? So can we have some sort of mitigation like the firewall systems or some communication? Can we centralize all the communication, go through one channel, kind of these things? So and also look at how can we uh, reduce the attack surface by designing the so if people have gone through the IEC 62443, we call it as zones and conduits, right? So can we redesign the zones and conduits in a way that we reduce the attack surface? So those are all some of the things, and provide if there is a way to give more better patches for new vulnerabilities, we do that as well as part of the patching cycle. So that is the way to deal with the legacy product. What was the first one, Raj? Sorry, I forgot.
No, just in terms of the risk calculus for each customer is
Yeah,
different,
so for
right? So
each customers and each versions, right? So because we it versions becomes very important for us. It's not the product risk, it is the product version risk, because we may not test that same version for next 5 years, right? So the version goes to one customer, may not go to other customer, right? So the customer, until they ask for us some new features or there is a really risk one, will not touch that. That stays there, right? So the risk stays at the release or version level, and vulnerabilities also stay at that level, version level, right? Not at the product level. And every version goes through the same rigor on the security testing, right? So it starts with a SAST or even before that in the development, everything goes with the same rigor. And again, we follow the IEC 62443 and we have security level. We may not treat a security level 1, SC1 or SC0 as well, like the way we treat the SC3 or 4, right? So the security incorporated in these product depends on what it requires for individual products. So that's how we drive that.
All right, thank you. So, Deepak, I'd like to get your perspective on this. The original question, which was
Yeah.
basically how the design risk decisions are made across the different components of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way Casey and Jagadish really framed it kind of hits the nail on the head, because the key takeaway here is product security must not be bolted in, but built in, right? So let's move away from let's patching these gaps and then work through it, but really built it into the product. So when we are really focusing on mitigating the complexity early, identifying the cyber risks earlier is faster, cheaper, and easier to fix if we are really thinking through the life cycle. I know we have talked about IEC 62443 and others. It's very important to think through more from the risk point of view. Now, address this through a combination of secure by design and secure by default principle is absolutely the key here, because as we are really thinking through it from the secure by design principle perspective, it really brings in the flexibility into the architecture without compromising the core integrity. And that really goes in for precisely the legacy products conversation we are having. But then it gets very interesting when we are talking about the secure by default, because if we really enforce the secure by default into the product, it helps build a strong security posture from the get-go, from the out of the box, and that becomes the key. So I know we as we kind of as the product security work on the new products while still catching up the legacy, really building in the product security and not bolted on is the key principle, the way I see it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to
And
mention on that secure by
right.
default. Secure by default changes, right? So products that were created in the 80s, I mean, products I
Yep.
wrote, say admin still, right? So when you're doing refreshes and those additional mitigations, but the other thing that we always have to consider as we're going through this is some of these are very small footprints. They don't have a lot of memory when you're trying to update older products. There was one that we had that had like 4 bytes left. So you can only do so much for some of those legacies, and people don't want to rip and replace them. They want to know more. What do I have to do? Is something called the Purdue model, for example, in an OT environment. So that's very important that we need to always consider is how can they still continue forward while being secure, because you can't re-architect a lot of these products because they're tied to the chips that were put into the product.
Absolutely. Yeah, very challenging for sure. So, Deepak, I had one follow-up question for you. In terms of, I know you are at Intuitive Surgical, if your devices used in surgery and things like that, right? Life and death, right there. And then there are IoT devices that may not be that life critical, right? So, in terms of adding, did that the fact that the end product that was used was going to be used in surgeries, did that give an added level of business importance to that? Maybe funding was easier, or maybe it was not. I do not know. So I want to know how the end application actually factors in the funding that you get for these programs.
Yeah, very important one. So I think what you're hitting on is actually the safety implications downstream as part of the product outcome, and then does it really change us how we approach the product security conversation guidance with the leadership and the funding? Absolutely, because as you're looking at the risk, right, there's absolutely the hard risk perspective and the non-hard risk perspective. Now, evaluating the harm risk in a certain way drives us for a certain outcome. Now, as this landscape is evolving and precisely towards the connected healthcare or the connected product ecosystem, you understand now by changing one bit somewhere might have a downstream impact somewhere else. So thinking that through, but the key here is, and I know Casey and Jagadish already touched on it, is the pen testing, and that's the situation at times product security teams get into. Is as we are looking at the threat modeling, we are looking at more of the logical layer. We are looking at more on the concept to really prove the hypothesis and then enforcement of the security controls, but really taking that a little bit further with the pen testing and proving that that might happen in actually a controlled or uncontrolled environment is the key here, which really helps us build a better use case for the funding. Otherwise, it might just seem like just a ask to get more funding. So really proving it more from the safety implication, and then we have all of these tools available, right? And precisely artificial intelligence have even pushed it further, where now you can use Gen AI and others to really expand on the use cases, your test cases, your attack surface. I know we briefly touched on. So kind of combining that together in order to prove the safety implication goes long way as we are looking at not only the funding. I mean, funding can be translated into dollars to buy more products or services, but also the resources or the skills we are looking at bringing into our organization.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So going on to the next question here. I know when it comes to product innovation, there's always kind of a trade-off between the time to market, the performance, the security, and then there's compliance part to it. Right. So if you can maybe touch upon that, Jagdish, if I can call on you to answer this question. How do you basically work with the different stakeholders to make sure that, you know what, I know this product needs to go out fast, but hold on, you need to secure this and things like that.
Yeah. So in our word, in the IACS word or OT word, it's not about the pace, right? It's about more because there is a lot of safety aspect, there is a lot of test and certification happens. So obviously, not like in the digital world where you have fast-paced what do you call deployment. We I mean generally what I've seen in the engineering companies are V model, right? So you start with a V model development cycle. It goes little slower. It's not that fast paced typically, but of course because of the like I earlier said, because the product is going to be on the field for the long term, right? So tech debt is one of the key issue, right? So it could be tech debt or security debt. So you end up creating by the time you develop. For instance, in aviation, I think it takes at least 6 to 8 years to complete the product deployment from the design, right? So it takes a long time. So obviously, we need to think in that direction, and we obviously going to have that tech debt for sure. And the second thing is ultimately the risk. We need to make sure that we give that risk accountability to the product teams. We act as an enabling function. We act as advisors, right? So we need to give all the information so that the product teams make the informed decision about a risk, right? So, and again, when we are giving the risk, I'm sure your Purple Book is coming up with a risk COE. It is going to be an interesting discussion there, but how do we give that risk, right? How do you help them prioritize the risk is going to be a very important aspect. And the lastly I want to call out is the contract. What are we going to agree upon with the customer on the contract, right? So these are all. This is how we trade off between the security and the delivery with the product.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Cassie?
So I want to hit on the compliance part of it for a moment. Jagadish was correct. We are creating products that are generally multi-generational products that you're taking. Okay, I've got this product; it's working great. We have a great market share of it, but we need to evolve. And so the evolving means that's the opportunity that we have to really reconsider the cybersecurity aspects of it. But we also have to keep in mind that word I keep using, interoperability, because let's say that programmable logic controller that's in a manufacturing environment needs to talk to one that's 15 years old, and that one may only be able to support HTTP or TLS 1.0. So this still has to go into the product to be able to do that interoperability and work with other things. But off by default, Deepak mentioned secure by default. And so we have to provide more additional warnings and information to that customer. Like, if you turn this off, you should be doing these steps in addition. Make sure you have these layers, because it has to work in these environments that, you've got a manufacturing plant that might have been running for the last 50 years. So they're connected, but they shouldn't be. A lot of these products, we use the term in the industry, edge devices. If I'm putting something on the edge, that means, yes, it can be internet facing. A lot of these products are not edge devices, meaning they don't have, threat mitigation capabilities and so on and so forth that you would see sort of in, a physical firewall or some kind of router. Now, when it comes to compliance, what that also means is we have older, and let's say legacy products, that term, that cannot meet today's standards for cybersecurity. So when California came out with this connected devices law back in 2019, and everything by January 2020 had password change on first use. Well, think about my world for one of the products. The first use is the electrician doing the install. And so it's really not first use, it's customer first use. So in the product security world, we have to interpret and talk about it from our standpoint. What does this mean at the product level, which Jagadish mentioned, is that there's commissioning activities, there's other things. It's not just a Fitbit. And so you have a lot of different layers that we have to consider in regards to compliance. So with that law, and now like with the EU Cyber Resilience Act, which has a lot in regards to product security, how do you meet those layers besides the secure development lifecycle? It's, do you have paths for upgrade or free patches and things like that? That in the product security world, if you want a free patch, that could be for a $4 million system. So you have service contracts. So it's not a simple concept when it comes to product security that we have to keep in mind.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Great perspective here. So, Deepak, would you like to add something to it, or can I move on to the next question?
Yeah, I think what I'll add very quickly is the monitoring aspect of it. We talked about the compliance and the overall kind of the management, because as we now all understand that embedding security into the life cycle is the key from the planning to end of life. The key is all security findings are not the same. Neither all findings need mitigations, nor all of them are release blockers. However, that's kind of just triggered when Casey was talking about the compliance. However, all of them are traceable. So can we build a system where we can kind of trace it, and then getting into that mode of monitoring to meet our compliance objectives, regulatory expectation, etc. So what we have used these documented exceptions, workflow with stakeholder sign-offs and ongoing reassessments and the monitoring and the tracking. But here the key is, and then I'll quickly pick on the patch latency issue. Casey was bringing it up, is including the patch latency as we are doing the threat modeling. There are scenarios where systems are not even connected to internet by design because they are so legacy. But enforcing secure by default principle into that really help us bring the risk level to the acceptable or the tolerable range. Otherwise, it ends up being a mess, and then we know that it gets into not only the regulatory review, fines, etc., but the recalls, etc., as well. So having that proactive management from security point of view, to me is the key, and we must be enforcing that.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So I have a question here now on the AI part of it. AI is very hot now, right? So the implications of AI in product security. So as you see it, so Jagadish, what's your take on this?
I mean, this is two face of the question. There is two face for this question, right? So how product security is impacting I mean, the AI impacting the product security in two ways. One, is it helping on the product side? So obviously there is a lot of product which were legacy started using AI all of a sudden, right? So without assessing the risk, that's a big thing, right? And then the risk standpoint is the AI generated code, right? So we use a lot of AI generated code. How do you identify there's copy left happening? So these large language models are trained on the open public code, and it just grabs everything. So you have copy left, copyright infringement issues and all those things, right? So, and then the threat modeling. Again, you have to look at a lot of threat modeling. I'm sure Deepak can go through that as well. But from the how can we use AI for the product security is very interesting. I've been talking to my team on that aspect. Today, we do a lot of testing, multiple layer of testing, right? So we start with the threat model, security, architecture review, then comes to SAST, SCA, firmware testing, pen test. So there is a load of testing which we do. So can we just create some agentic AI? I mean, can we bring in that agentic AI to do all this testing at the right stage? And more than that, I think it is the AI can also bring in the real-time intelligence. The pen test or SAST, today SAST is a weakness. I personally don't consider the SAST as a vulnerability. It is more of a weakness because it's the exploitability is still under question, right? So can we use AI to understand the real-time exploitability on those aspects, right? And similarly, there is a lot of manual testing we do, many manual testing either with a pen test, though we use some tool like Burp Suite or other scan tools and these things. So can we enhance our capabilities to to improve the test quality? Lastly, on the risk, right? So can we bring in the real time intelligence into the risk and decision making using the AI? So those are all some of the things which we are looking at from an AI standpoint for the product security.
Yeah, and I know I'm like having seen your program, you put in a very robust program to basically look at the just overwhelming number of vulnerabilities that are there
Yeah.
in your environment, and then across the scanners, and then prioritize them on that one, right? Can you speak a little bit about that? How you are doing that?
I think we started bringing all the so first and foremost thing, bringing all the vulnerabilities to one place, like using some ASPM or some as a ASPM platform, and using the correlation deduplication is the first act, right? So taking off all the false positives and everything, and then adding more intelligence, right? So for instance, can we get some intelligence from the ASPM is itself, right? So bringing some intelligence like the exploitable quotient or EPSS aspect of it, adding that and look at what is going on with those vulnerabilities in the real time, in the wild, right? So adding those things and shaping, adding more seasoning to the just CVSS score, right? So you start with the CVSS score, then add the EPSS, and then you add the business context to it, right? So that kind of gives a better risk scoring to overall the vulnerabilities. Otherwise, if you're just giving the vulnerability with the CVSS scoring, it is very difficult for the business to prioritize this whole thing, right? So that is where we are driving our risk-based approach program.
Yeah. All
Hope
right. Yeah.
that
Thank you.
helps.
Yeah. Thank you, Jagadish. So going to that AI question. So, Cassie, I'd like to get your perspective on the AI. How you think AI is impacting product security?
Yeah. So I want to plus one all of the stuff Jagadish mentioned, but as a developer and not having enough firmware engineers in the world and software engineers that are working specifically in code bases that are written in C and C++, which is the majority of the code that's still out there on a lot of these cyber physical systems, not only in the operating systems, but actually in the drivers and in the proprietary code. This using AI copilots that can actually help with that code maintenance, can make the suggestions of updating the library, because you don't always, what we do in our world is sometimes we backport the security patches, not upgrade the entire library of something, because there's too many risks when it comes to fully changing out that library, or you just can't do it because you need those functions that were in the older library. So using those co-pilots to be able to suggest and make those things, something that you would have, maybe half a developer work on for a full year to do. Now co-pilots can make the suggestions and they can verify, yes, this would cause, or not cause an issue, is a game changer. Instead of them having to walk through lines and lines of code, be able to get 80% there and do that 20%, like, let me make sure about this and review this, of what they're really good at doing. That's just going to be and is a very big time saver for those legacy products.
Thank you. Deepak?
Yeah, so very well crafted, Casey and Jagadish. The way I actually look at it, and I'm a firm believer of all of the value props coming out of overall AI efforts into product security, because it's helping practitioners like us to help our business make the risk informed decisions, right? So that's where really it is. Now, we talked about a variety of different areas here. Uh, there is another angle to it. I see the repeatability aspect of it. With the agentic AI, there are a lot of security assurance and compliance teams spending hours and hours in not only filling these compliance forms, but also collecting the evidence or working through the checklist. And there is absolutely a value prop of using agentic AI to really automate that pipeline end to end. Now, pushing it even further, in cybersecurity and precisely the product security landscape, there is an aspect of validation through security testing or pen testing. Really leveraging the power of agentic AI can be really transforming to improve this end-to-end activities for organizations like us. Now, a little bit on the Gen AI. I know there are a lot of teams who lack sometimes budgets or skills or the resources. They can absolutely leverage GenAI as a kind of the multiplier for their organization to help build the use cases or refine their threat models, or even push it further, is start building the attack scenarios which more mimic their business and their landscape, instead of just using something generalized through the best practices or whatsoever. So there are layered benefits as I look at the artificial intelligence into product security.
All right, excellent. Thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, AI is a very hot topic, and we are going to have a center of excellence focused just on AI. So, stay tuned for that one. If you have an interest, send me an email. When it starts, I'll be sure to let you know about that. So now I have before I know there's one question from Siva. We'll get to that in a minute quickly. Before we go there, I had one question for each one of you. Why a center? Why did you decide to join a center of excellence? What is it that you're getting here that you're not getting elsewhere?
I'll start. So Raj knows this story. I've told it many times. I met Nikhil Gupta the February or January before COVID. We got to talk. They initiated Armor Code, and when he and I sat down for coffee right before the lockdown, I said, I don't have a home where I can talk to cybersecurity and product security leaders that are building products. And when I said that, I said, I I go to lots of CISO events, and I'm not in the technical day-to-day world. So B-sides events and things like that, it's much too granular. I need, that leadership level for application and product security. And they gave it to me. I love them for that. So the Center of Excellence, now that we've grown so large, the Center of Excellence, I've actually, when I was in Bangalore, got to meet Jagadish in person. I've met a lot of you in person. It really gives me that community to talk to people, not just in the Silicon Valley area, but around the world on these hard topics that I love. I love product security. That's why I think a center of excellence where we can now focus again and go deep is I'm really excited about it.
Thank you. You have been an amazing driving force behind this community. Appreciate that. So Jagadish and Deepak.
Yeah, I mean, Casey kind of hit it right there. Is the key is the global community, right? It's not Silicon Valley, it's not Bangalore. It's building this global community of security leadership and practitioners to really talk about the real life scenarios. And then we talk quite a lot today. And then these are real life problems, right? When we are really talking about the legacy devices, or we are talking about these embedded devices still running CC++, and we are still trying to work through the guardrails. Yes, there are a lot of material and data out there in terms of the best practices and the guardrails, but where I see the key value prop is really talking to not only the like-minded people, but the practitioners who have these real life examples, scenarios, data, and the mechanics on how they really work through it really gives me this competitive advantage to work through with my team and then accelerate some of our product security gaps. Love it.
Thank you, Jagadish.
Completely agree with Casey and Deepak. Look, for me, I think product security or cybersecurity for that matter is no more a boardroom discussion. It's a national defense topic, right? So with a lot of things going on, and I don't think one person or one organization can solve the problem here, right? Like Casey mentioned, interoperability. That should get out of not just in the technical, but we need to also share and care for each other. So that is one of the reasons why I'm part of this COE, and I want to learn from others how they are doing, and I want to share what we are doing. So that way, we all are contributing to a safer world tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yeah. Coming to the questions that we have here, Siva asked a question specifically to Deepak. I think when you're talking about exceptions.
My question is basically coming from the velocity with which the product teams move and the never-ending pile of vulnerabilities that we identify. Again, forget about the runtime piece, right? Even in the pre-runtime, the continuous static dynamic testing, all the other components that constantly keep our pipelines so busy. And although the product teams are in 100% alignment that security is a mandatory step, more often than not, we are proverbially becoming the roadblockers, right? We are like, hey, you have this particular issue, you have to patch it before we sign off on your production release. And they're like, we are at the tail end, we cannot do this now, right? Is there a way for us to raise an exception? Yes, we do have an exception process, but to large, at least with us, right? I'm sure with others as well, most of the R&D teams, they have their at least 2 releases, right, already planned ahead of time. So there is always, you raise an exception, right? We say you have 180 days to patch this, and 180 day comes and they are like, oh, well, we raised like 5 exceptions, we can patch 2, the other 3, we need to push it down the line. So there is always chasing the exceptions, and not to mention there is always this new set of vulnerabilities piling up. And my team is like, I have a reasonably sized team. In spite of that, I have all the top tier tech stack, right? In spite of that, the question is like, there is always this volume to velocity discrepancy, right? How are you handling it in your organizations? If there is any lessons learned, tidbits that we can adopt, would love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can take it. And Jagdish and Casey, please share your insights as appropriate. So where it actually in my experience, where it really shifted the game is when we shifted the mindset. Earlier, we were looking at all of these traced issues, exceptions, whatever you call it, and then just driving into the closure. But really having the dialogue with the development and engineering teams to not only understand what they might be going through and what might be the roadblockers, but and I think you hit it right, is we cybersecurity, product security might be seen as a blocker, whereas my always stand is we are the business enablers. Now, what we can
Mhm.
do is we can create the situational awareness in the organization by providing the data and the facts. Now, how I have precisely solved it is really looking at not only this traceability, but really creating or have a mindset of that it's actually a human problem. It's not really just that tactical problem we are trying to enforce some patch, but really shift the mindset. So what we did, we created the turnaround times, we created the service level agreements, we got the agreements on them, we created the notification or auto notification process where I see quite a lot of improvements is where we started notifying our developer and an engineering workforce say 30 days in advance that now the SLA is ticking, and then very soon it'll be expiring. And then with that, also add the escalation metrics. So there are pathways to do it, but the reality is, and I'll just read your question, I pulled it on my screen, is are you enforcing the exception submitted and approval are closed in due time? The answer is no, because that would be an ongoing issue. And then the way I see it
Right.
is an opportunity for us because then we really understand the landscape and
Mhm.
leverage that to provide the guidance and the guardrails for the business because as a product security, we are in the business of managing the risk for our organization, right? So
Mhm.
really putting that hat on and having that continuous dialogue. I see that it'll be going on for a very long time. We talked about secure by design principles. We talked about secure by default. We talked about legacy, but kind of taking this layered approach towards it and then working on a different level uh, helps us bring into a tolerable range. Because the way I look at it is, uh, I no longer put emphasis on each risk I have in my list, but look
Mhm.
at the risk category of the system as a whole. And if I can bring that into the acceptable range, I think we can work through it. But I'll let others chime in as well. And happy to discuss further, Shiva, if needed
Yeah, I
Yeah.
later.
think this is a long discussion, right?
Yeah.
So this is not a small topic, but I
Yep.
completely agree with what Deepak said, right? So first of all, I usually ask, why am I a gatekeeper, right? Should I be the gatekeeper because I'm just a consultant, right? So I'm just enabling the team. So ultimately, we usually what we do two things. One, enable the actual approver. Basically, it's going to be the product owner who is going to approve the risk because he is the guy responsible for the complete product management, right? So we enable him to look at what is in there in the exception request, the
Mhm.
reasons, what is the business impact, and everything, right? So based on that, the product owner is the one who is accepting the risk, and he is going to own that risk forever, for till that risk is there, right? So
Right.
enable them. That's the first thing, right? So they start once you hit the product owner. Obviously, the budget comes from the product owner. He will start putting the budget in and give the right, because engineering team is always the I mean, what do you call? They wait for others to give them the funding, resources, and
Mhm.
everything, right? So we need to look at that root cause to solve, right? The second thing is, I keep telling my engineering team, use this as an opportunity to get more funding or more. So don't hesitate to show the risk in the leadership, because that's one way of getting more funding, right? And if you need help, let us know. We can come and pitch in the meeting to get more funding or whatever is required. Ideally, the resources, right? So money, time, cost, whatever it is, right? So uh, if we can enable the engineering team act as a supporting agent, that makes life a lot easier, and engineering team will always support you as well. You will not be treated as a gatekeeper or anything, so you will become a friend of them. That's been my experience, and it has worked for me at least.
Yeah. No, I can empathize with where you're going, right? Again, the only challenge I see that is there comes a moment, even for the engineers, where somebody will have to declare the bankruptcy. It's like their exception pile has grown so much because, see, exception is essentially what we are transferring our risk ownership to the engineering teams, right? Now, product team being product team, right? I've seen multiple situations where they're like, you know what, we declare bankruptcy, right? There is nothing we can do now. Let's figure it out, and then we are like, all right, let's try and see what is the bare minimum that can be done, and let's move forward with it. And obviously, and this is like you said, rightfully said, this is an entire discussion in itself. I don't want to derail this call talking about the solutionizing here, but I appreciate your insights, guys.
Yeah, Siva. So Cassie was suggesting, I think this can be a whole topic in itself. I welcome you to join the Center of Excellence. If you
Sure.
can, I just sent you a link here for those of you who are interested to be part of this discussion. This will continue every month for an hour. We meet, and then you get access to all these leaders, and then there are a few others that are already part of it. So the discussion continues there. So I encourage you to join this.
No, I'm there. I'm already there. I've been very what do you say? Not frequent to these ones. Middle of the day kind of a thing. But I'll continue to join. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Please join. And so outside of this, Cassie was mentioning, there is a session by the Women in Security Center of Excellence on CRA, Cyber Resiliency Act, which I know is very hot. That's right next week, just a week away from now. So I hope to see many of you in the session as well. So with this one, I'd like to end the call. I know it went 7 minutes beyond. We tried to close on time, but this was a very hot topic. So I'd like to thank Cassie, Jagadish, and Deepak for joining in and sharing your perspective. You have years, decades of experience here, and you distilled your insights into this. And thank you so much.